Welcome, everyone, to the 2022 Holistic Pain Relief Summit. I'm thrilled that you've taken the time to join us. My name is Trish Rossiter, and I'm your host for the summit. This is for men and women living with pain and who have a goal to get back to functioning better on a daily basis without needing to take as many drugs and have invasive procedures. If you haven't already done so, I invite you to join our Facebook group. Each day of the summit, there will be a thread where you can post your questions. And we'd love to hear as well your best takeaway from the speakers of the day. Today, I'm delighted to introduce to you Dr. Joe Piazza. Dr. Joe is in Ottawa, and he's been a chiropractor, a neurostructural chiropractor for more than 20 years. Joe's fundamental belief is that to experience optimal wellness, there must be balance and integration of all aspects of mind, body, and spirit. Dr. Joe maintains that our bodies have been designed to adapt, grow, and evolve with an infinite number of changes in our environment. And the secret to a good life lies in accessing useful strategies to move with the changing experiences that life brings. We all possess the resources we require, and we simply need to learn how to access them successfully. So I invited Dr. Joe to join us today because to speak on neuroplasticity, because fundamental to many, if not all of our presentations on this summit are related to neuroplasticity. And it's not a topic that's known a lot about by everyday audiences, it's my understanding. So Dr. Joe is here to explain it in words that we will understand. Thank you, Dr. Joe.
Thank you, Trish. It's a pleasure to be here. Yes, neuroplasticity. It is actually quite easy to understand. And we're going to talk a little bit tonight about what is neuroplasticity and how does it play out in our lives. Now, at the Happy Spine in Ottawa, we focus on something called neurostructural correction. We are looking for neurostructural shifts, so a disconnection or a shift between the neurology of your body, so that's the nerves, the brain, all of the nerve system, and the structure, our spine, our posture, and the organs within us. So when those things become disconnected, we become unwell. And that's sort of a foundational concept to understanding what we're going to be talking about tonight with neuroplasticity and why we become unwell, why we get sick and have all of these other secondary symptoms and conditions like pain and discomfort, autoimmune diseases, cancer, whatever it might be. Many of these things happen when we become disconnected and our bodies are not able to change, not able to use the neuroplasticity that we have within us. So let's start a little bit with neuroplasticity. What is it? Neuro, clearly nerves. Plasticity means it's changeable, it's movable. Things can be made different. Think of your brain almost like a big lump of plasticine. We can move it and mold it in different ways. And the way we move it and mold it in different ways is by creating new connections or different connections in the brain through different thinking, feeling different emotions and experiences, and behaving differently in our lives when we have new experiences. Most of our life we spend in a very narrow comfort zone. And anything that happens outside of that comfort zone, our body mind perceives as a threat, something that's different. We are hardwired to notice things that are different in our environment so that we can be ready to either fight it or run away from it. And when we can start to think differently about what we might have normally perceived as a threat and instead see it potentially as an opportunity or opportunity for growth, or just not a threat at all, then our comfort zone starts to expand. It's been my experience in practice of over 20 years, plus a undergraduate degree in kinesiology and with a minor in psychology, that many people live with maybe five, six, seven, eight emotions predominantly. And there's many, many more emotions than that. But most people live within a range of about 5 to 8 emotions. So life becomes very limited. And that those emotions and how we experience life with those emotions creates a certain perspective in life. And what ends up happening is when we experience something in life, we feel a certain way about it, we think a certain way about it, all of the nerves that are required to hold that perspective start to fire together like a community. Think of a whole bunch of ants working together. They all work together to create a specific structure. And so if we continually experience the same things with the same emotions, with the same thoughts, with the same behaviors, we start to really emphasize within our brain structure and within our nervous system certain habits, and all those neurons, all those nerves fire together. They end up what we call wiring together.
Mhm.
If you've ever studied any of Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, he's doing a lot of work with meditation and creating our reality through our thoughts and emotions and our behaviors. And it just so happens that Dr. Joe is also a chiropractor. And he's done some incredible research with his techniques that have shown actual neuroplastic changes. And what the big message here is that if we want to change our experiences, change our internal environment, change our experience or perspective of the world outside of us, we need to shift the nerves that are firing together. We need to fire different nerves and get them to wire together differently in order to have a different experience. And so we start to create these new communities of nerve cells. And the reason that it can be so difficult sometimes to change habits is because these habits have become so used, these nerves have fired together so often that they've
Mhm.
wired together, and there's a coating around the nerves that's basically like fat, and it helps the nerve transmission be much faster, so that the pathways that we use frequently, like a habit, fire very quickly. We don't even have to think about it. We just do it. And so as we start to try and create a new habit or changes in our environment, we actually have to get those wires that have been basically glued together with this fatty tissue to unglue themselves and start to connect to other nerves so that we start to have a different experience. So that's the basics of neuroplasticity. And so hopefully that makes it a little bit more easy to understand.
Thank you. So the next question, I guess you're probably going to answer is, how do we do that?
That's the $64,000 question, or I guess in today's inflation, the $64 billion question.
Exactly.
So, how do we do that? Well, here's the thing: when we continually allow ourselves to have the same experiences, the same emotions, the physiology in our body and in our minds, the hormones, the neurohormones, the chemicals from the brain that go out to the organs, they all flow in a particular way. And in order to have different experiences, we need to also feel things differently. We need to think about things differently, that open mind. And our body's ability to have those perspectives is definitely mirrored or reflected in the structure of our body, how we hold ourselves. We've probably all seen people walking around with they've got that hunched over look, the head forward, shoulders all tucked over, and very stuck in that position. And when we're stuck in that position, it is much more difficult, just from a straight physiological point of view, to take a deep breath, for our heart to work properly because it's all being pushed in on, for our internal organs to work properly. And emotionally, in that place, the physiology sets up the emotions of anger, sadness, depression, etc. And it's very much more difficult to find joy, happiness, love, ecstasy when we're all here and protecting ourselves. Versus if we just are able to have our shoulders come down and back, our chin comes up a bit, the chest lifts up a little bit, and then we can take a fuller breath from there. It's much easier to find those positive emotions, the higher emotions, if you will. So, what we want to do is start to shift things. And what ends up happening is this is going to tie into some of Bruce Lipton's works, who some of you may know of, called epigenetics. So epi means near or beside, and genetics is the genes, the hereditary aspects of ourselves. And the genes are within the nucleus of every single cell in our body. And interestingly, the way that genes can get expressed are partially controlled to a large degree by the vibration of the cell wall. So you got the cell, imagine it's a big blob like this, and inside you have this little nucleus, and it has a little cell, and it has a little wall around it as well. The actual cell wall vibrates, and it has sites on it that are receptor sites. We've heard a lot about receptor sites over the last couple of years. And the receptor sites actually change shape depending on how a cell is vibrating, literally vibrating. And so when those receptor sites change, it changes what signaling molecules can attach to the cell, which then signal which genes to be expressed. So when we say, oh, it's a genetic disease, it's something that I have, it's in my genes, I can't avoid it. Actually, there's a lot of research over the last 15 or so years starting to show that, in fact, yes, we can change it by shifting the vibration within us. So this is the
Okay.
basis of a lot of energy work.
Hmm.
Shifting vibration, sound therapy, color and light therapy as well. Those are all frequency. It's all vibration. Nikola Tesla talked a lot about vibration and frequency. Albert Einstein talked about if you want to see something in your life, you must align with the frequency of that thing and it will appear. It can't happen any other way because like energies attract like energies. And so when we can start to, and we also know from neuroanatomical and physiological studies that our cells have a characteristic healthy vibration. And when the cells are sick and diseased, they have a different vibration. And the cells become more susceptible to being invaded by bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites, etc. And this was basically the foundation of chiropractic when it was founded 127 years ago. D.D. Palmer asked, why do two men working at the same bench, one gets sick and the other doesn't? And it's very much about the environment, our internal environment. Is it hospitable or inhospitable to bacteria, viruses, parasites, fungi, etc.? So when we can start to shift the vibration of the cells, we start to shift the genes that get expressed. And also the gene, when the cell is vibrating in an unhealthy state, the genes actually start to not function as well, and things start to break down. You may have heard of what's called a telomere. And the telomere is like a little hat on the end of the gene, and then when the telomeres get shorter and shorter, your lifespan decreases. When they're longer, you can have a potentially longer lifespan, or at least that gene will have a shorter or longer lifespan, depending on the telomeres. And they're starting to use this as an indication of health and aging in the population as well. So if we want to start shifting our vibration from a very practical level, we need to pay attention to everything that we put into our body, mind. So the food that we eat, is it healthy? Is it organic? Is it raised without pesticides and extra chemicals? The water that we drink, do you drink filtered water? Or you just drink it right out of the tap that has a lot of other chemicals in it that are very hard to filter out? What emotions, how are our relationships emotionally? Do we surround ourselves with people that are emotionally toxic, or are we around people that uplift us and help us feel better? What do we want? What about mentally? What are the books that you're reading? What are the television shows you're watching? I would say don't watch TV, but that's a whole other story. So everything that we put into ourselves has an effect on the vibration of our cells and of us as a human being. And we can shift that by different techniques like meditation, acupuncture, acupressure, massage therapy, shiatsu, stimulation of the nervous system via the spine, and we're going to get into that in a second. Just overall movement in general is a very healthy way of not only creating health and well-being in us, but it also shifts our emotional state as well. So those are some of the things that we can do.
You mentioned genetics.
Mm-hmm.
So is it could be that, yes, I have the genetic makeup of illnesses in my family.
Yes.
However, I have the power to change the expression of that gene. Is that
Basically what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we all have certain genetic predispositions, but whether those genes get turned on or not is dependent upon how those genes are interacting with other genes within us, and also what we're doing to shift our overall vibration. Now, I'm not saying that it at this point in human evolution that we can instantly cure things, although I know that people have. In fact, that's basically what spontaneous remission is, right? Somebody just for whatever reason, whatever they were doing, maybe it was a belief within themselves that they changed, or the way they think shifted, and in that moment, whatever it was they had is gone. It has become irrelevant in their life, so to speak. And so we know that this does in fact happen. And when we can start to consciously tap into these practices in a much more intentional way, we can create literally miracles in our life.
Amazing.
It is.
That's
actually
amazing. One other question: when you talk about the vibration of the cell wall, now is that? I mean, jumping on a trampoline.
Right.
Is that a type of vibration, or is it strictly internal?
So it's an intrinsic vibration. So every single thing in the universe is, at its most basic element, is energy. Right. Even my hand, it looks solid. You know, the desk that I'm sitting at, I'm banging on it, it appears solid, but you go into a deep enough level and it's just energy vibrating at a specific frequency. And so our cells, because it's all energy, are vibrating at a specific energy. Jumping on a trampoline is, in fact, great exercise, and it will help you feel better. And when we start to feel better and have higher, quote unquote, higher emotions, we feel more joyful, more in tune with our internal environment, more connected to people around us. In fact, that does end up raising our overall energetic vibration because we feel better. We know through research that our emotional state absolutely influences our immune system. Some of the great work done by Candace Pert back in the late 60s, early 70s, a great book of her. She's unfortunately passed away a few years ago. She was the discoverer of the opiate receptor in the brain. And so she did a lot of pioneering work in also identifying emotional receptors and emotional signaling molecules in the brain and in the body. And what she found was that not only in the emotional centers in our brain do we have receptors for the molecules of emotion, but we also have it in our muscles, and especially dense amount of those receptors in the muscles on either side of our spine. And also the immune system cells have the same receptors for the molecules of emotion. Wow. And when we know that when we feel depressed, etc., angry, upset, in grief, we're more likely to get sick. Or when we're sick, we're also more likely to feel those emotions. Right. And so when we can start to feel better, and I'm not saying just positive thinking and ignoring what's actually going on in your life, because that's basically suppressing and disconnecting from what's going on. I'm saying is acknowledge what's going on and accept it in the moment, and then look for the next highest emotion that you can find. You're not generally going to go from depression all the way to ecstasy. It's too big a jump. It takes too much energy. You're probably going to go from depression to anger. I mean, there's many people who say that depression is basically suppressed anger or rage. So if you can find the rage and then the anger, and then from there upset and then maybe anxiousness, and then you're starting to move up the scale of emotions, as it were. Then it starts to become easier to find better emotions that are empowering and will help you feel better.
Okay. Thank you. That's good to know. Just to move it up
Yeah, just take one
slowly,
just one
surely.
step at a time if you have to, like that, or
Yeah.
even a half a step at a time. You don't try to, don't try to climb Mount Everest in one big jump. It takes a lot of steps and a lot of preparation to get
Turn on a comedy show,
there.
maybe.
Yeah, but well, there's I forget the guy, the doctor's name. He was this is going back 30-ish years ago. He was diagnosed with cancer, and I believe it was cancer, and he basically healed himself by watching funny movies, going to comedy shows, watching comedy tapes, etc., by just increasing the positive emotions within his body and creating that cascade of positive chemicals in his body. And I don't remember the name of the book at the moment.
Interesting. I know people who do not like comedians. So I think maybe on some level they're not ready to go to that vibration.
Maybe, yeah,
Perhaps.
and I think also with comedians, there is not all comedians, but many comedians. I think what their job in our society to do is to point out some uncomfortable truths, but in a approachable way. And some people, if you're not ready to look at some of those, what we would call uncomfortable truths, then yeah, you would find a comedian to be disconcerting, and you might not like them.
And offensive for
And
some.
offensive
Yeah.
even potentially, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. So brain stimulation.
Mm-hmm.
Some other ways you're going to talk about chiropractic
Mm-hmm.
treatments,
Sure.
and take it away.
Sure. So the third big component of this neurostructural shift and neurostructural correction is how can we help the body become more self-aware so that we go from sort of a non-conscious connection to or disconnection from our body mind to a much more conscious awareness of being in tune with our rhythms, being in tune with, hey, my body, I just need to rest today, or hey, I don't need to be around people right now, or hey, I need a mental break, mental health break, those types of things. Many of us, and we've been taught in our culture and our society to power through. And powering through can be very actually disempowering and very harmful to our health. Now, I'm not saying you're gonna, for every little thing that you're gonna, like a hangnail, oh, I need a day off, I got a hangnail kind of thing. I'm talking about when those times when we are mentally, emotionally, physically exhausted, or when we're feeling overwhelmed. Where do we go for help? And one of the first places we can go is into our own internal resources, and then we can start to expand out and ask for help around us. So one of the ways that we can do this is through movement, and especially movement of the spine. There's a lot of research that shows that if we don't move our bodies enough, and especially our spine, then we're not sending enough signals to our hypothalamus, the relay station in the brain. The hypothalamus also does a lot of the work of producing and sending out hormones into the body to regulate our emotional state, our physiological state, those types of things. But it also passes messages from the body up higher into the cortex of the brain. And what research has been showing as they've been digging more into it, and the tools to do this research have become more refined and powerful, they've noted that if there are not enough signals coming up the spinal cord from the body through the hypothalamus to the cortex, the brain actually starts to shrink. And we become, in a way, dumber.
Mm.
We start to have more mental fog. Our memory deteriorates a little bit. our ability to formulate connections or meaning and thought between different experiences decreases a little bit. These are the types of things that happen. So and if you look at the last couple of years especially, and even more longer than that, as we've become, unfortunately, a more sedentary culture and society with computers and everybody's doing everything online, we end up
Mhm.
sitting like this, hand on a mouse, typing at a keyboard, looking down at a laptop if you're using a laptop. That whole ergonomics of that is a whole other story. But then what ends up happening is our spine and our body gets stuck there. And when that happens, every single joint in our body will realign itself in order to hold that position. So even the cartilage where the ribs attach to the breastbone, that cartilage will remodel to hold that position. And in order to get it to free it up so we can get to here again, we need to start doing things that will allow the body to move more so the brain goes, oh, I know what, and we need to be shifting this here and move this over here and this thing over here so we can realign into a much more connected state. And so what we do in chiropractic, and specifically with the neurostructural correction, is we're cueing the body to tune into areas that are already open and have energy to share with the areas that are stuck. Conventional chiropractic, we find those stuck spots and hammer them, and then the body goes, oh. But then, because the body was already kind of trying to protect itself there,
Mhm.
it wants to protect itself again, and you have to yell louder and louder. So what if instead you could just whisper to the body over here, because it's not investing any effort or energy into protecting itself, and it's connected either directly or indirectly through the nervous system, and we just say, hey, check this out, the body mind starts to do this on its own and starts to realign as it becomes more connected physically, emotionally, mentally, and even spiritually. They're all those things are all interconnected, and that we need all of those aspects or systems sharing information and energy efficiently and optimally in order to be as well as we possibly can.
Mhm.
So when we start to see in our office specifically, we're looking for certain things. We're looking for the breath to move a certain way in the body, particularly in the spinal column. Because when the breath moves in a particular way, in a wave, literally like this up the spine, rather than the whole back lifting and falling as a single unit, that's a much more advanced nervous system response to be able to do this than it is to do this. And it means that there's more movement, more stimulation happening in the spinal column and the spinal cord, sending that information up to the brain through the hypothalamus so that we become more connected, literally.
Mm. Fascinating.
It's a lot of fun stuff. It's like I've been doing this for over 20 years, and there's there's never a day that goes by when I am not in total awe of something that happens on the table in the office, of the body's amazing ability to do something.
Right. So, what I'm hearing also, besides the breath
Mm-hmm.
and the importance of proper breathing, which
Mm-hmm.
I guess we can learn a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
to be able to do that
Mm-hmm.
wavy intricacy, relaxation has to happen as well.
To a point, and this is one of the and I'm glad you brought that up, Trish, because relax. A lot of people say, "Oh, I love coming to the office because this is where I get to relax on the table." Sometimes we actually don't want relaxation to happen on the table.
Okay.
There are times when it's necessary, because sometimes relaxation, I hear this a lot with patients who say, oh, I can't meditate, my mind's too busy, et cetera, I gotta, and I meditate to make my mind quiet. And
Yeah.
that's really not what's really happening. What's really happening is the mind goes quiet as a result of when we connect to that inner place with that place. Tripping all over my words now because I get too many thoughts coming. Um,
Mm.
when we connect to that stillness that exists within all of us, that place of peace where we are already whole, that's when the mind goes quiet, because then the mind becomes in service of the rest of us. In our culture, we have put our mind above everything else, and we think that everything is a mental thing. And
Mhm.
you even hear people talk about mental health all the time, and they talk about the physical and the mental, and they leave out emotional. And
Right.
the emotional is the bridge between the physical and the mental. It all fits in there. And so what ends up happening is a lot of people use relaxation and meditation as an escape,
Mm.
as a way of getting away from things that they don't like, that they're uncomfortable with, that
Mhm.
and it keeps them in that comfort zone, in that smaller space, that smaller experience of life. So sometimes on the table, people will have, and especially in our office, and some of the other practitioners who practice in a similar way, they will have sometimes an experience, an internal experience that may be uncomfortable. You may have a physical experience that's uncomfortable, where a muscle gets tight or a cramp happens, and those are all signals that the body mind is reconnecting and finding the areas where there is potential for growth, to free up that stuck energy. Find those places within us where we have suppressed or pushed down experiences that we didn't know how to deal with in the moment that they happened, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, or whatever.
Mm. Mm.
So the idea of always trying to relax is not great. We actually, even as human beings, we talk about stress. Stress is bad. Well,
No.
would you consider exercise bad?
Yeah.
Exercise is stress. It's stress. It's a stressor on the body.
Right.
And we actually need a certain level of tension in our life and in our body in order to live. There's a certain the muscles in our back and in our legs, they have to have a certain amount of tension in order for us to stand upright. If we
Right.
didn't have that tension, we would collapse. So it's not always about relaxation. So there's a lot of different things, and if you watch as people in the street, and I can't turn it off when I'm walking in the streets. I watch how people walk. I watch how people move. And if you look, you can see, especially in the elderly population, they will walk a certain way. The shuffle that happens, the feet get a little bit wider and they kind of shuffle. So they have always got both feet on the ground. And the wider base of stance is so they feel better balanced. And the shuffle that they have both feet on the ground at all times is so they don't feel out of balance. Whereas a younger person, when we walk, there's a point where we're almost completely airborne. Definitely when we run, there's a point in the stride when we're completely airborne.
Right.
So what ends up happening is, because the brain isn't getting enough stimulation, or it's aging and there's other disease processes happening in the nerve system that causes that, one of the best things that we can do is create more stimulation all throughout our life. Do exercises that with movement from side to side. Like have your feet wide, step one foot out wide, squat down, come back up, bring your foot, and do the other. You can almost actually do it in the shape of a star. So do a lunge to the front, a lunge to the front at 45 degrees, a lunge out to the side, then backwards 45 degrees, straight back, and then you switch
Mhm.
legs and you do the same thing on the other side. So if you do that, 3 repetitions for each one once a day, you're the amount of stimulation and feedback you're going to give to your brain is going to be huge. Um, One of my favorite things to create even more feedback in my own system is reflexology. Some
Ah,
people swear by massage. Foot reflexology is one of my favorite things. I in fact prefer a good foot reflexology session to a full body massage generally.
I'll come and give you a treatment one day.
That would be awesome. So by giving feedback to the brain in as many different ways and unique ways as possible, because our brain, our nervous system, notices novelty. So the more that we can pay attention to new things, the more we're going to stimulate our brain. One of my favorite ways, in fact, of doing this, especially when I find myself getting stuck in a bit of a rut, I find myself doing the same things day after day, default mode,
Ah,
is I'll take a different route to and from the office, even if it's just one side street over or two side streets over, or I'll walk down past the office and then come back up, or something like that. Just for things to be different, or I'll walk on the other side of the street.
Okay.
And it
Okay.
just,
So
you just start to see your brain, you just start to notice things that you didn't notice before. And so
purposely break the habits.
purposely, intentionally breaking the habits and paying attention to observing and experiencing things new.
Okay. Sounds so easy.
It's, I liken it to say it's simple, and it's
Yes.
not always easy because of our habits. It's when we're trying to get new nerves to wire or fire together in new ways can be challenging because we've always done it in a certain way. So to create those new habits, it requires work, literally, and you just have to keep working at it. And some days you're going to be better at it than others, and we just have to accept that.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Joe. Is there anything else you'd like to say as we, if there's one, I mean, my biggest takeaway is that, we have the power in
Mm,
different ways to engage
right.
neuroplasticity and to affect a change on our life.
For sure. So yeah, so the last thing I would say is that, and you said it right there, we have the power within us. And this is so true. The power that made your body didn't stop working the day you were born. It's still working there to keep you alive. There's an intelligence, if you will, a life force that moves through us that keeps everything going. Just, I mean, the fact that we can breathe without thinking about it, or that our heart keeps beating without thinking about it, there's something that keeps us alive. There's a coordination that happens between all of the cells of our body to make us a coherent whole. And without that intelligence, we would die. We wouldn't be alive, plain and
Mhm.
simple.
Right.
And we've all, and one of the easiest ways to see it is when somebody dies. If you cut the skin of somebody who's dead, the skin never heals. There's no intelligence left there that says, let's put it back together. Let's have the cascade of chemicals that are needed to be produced. But if you're alive and you get cut, your body knows exactly what to do to heal it. We don't have to think about it. It just does it.
Right.
And so we have the power within all of us, and it's just a matter of tapping into that and using it in an intentional way.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
That's quite fascinating. It's a great overview.
Thank you. It's always with joy to talk about it and share with others my passion about empowering the greatness that's within you. That's every time I put my hands on somebody or I speak with somebody, it's about helping you
Right.
find that greatness within you.
Yeah, because we take so much for granted.
Mhm.
So this is an important reminder
Yeah, it's
of many things.
yeah, and that gratitude, I could do a whole 1 hour talk just on gratitude.
Yeah,
But it's gratitude is a very powerful force in our lives when we can tap into it and use it consciously.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm very grateful for you inviting me along and to be able to speak to so many people.
Okay, and we appreciate having you here.
Thank you. And I guess just the last thing, very last thing, would be to say that if somebody wants to work with us or work with me in Ottawa, and we offer a complimentary consultation. It's 20 or 30-minute conversation. There's no fee for it. Where we just talk about what's going on in your life and how we may or may not be able to help you, and go from there.
Mhm. And also, Dr. Joe is going to be offering um, a free download. Would you like to speak a little bit more to that?
Oh, okay. I'm also trained in hypnotherapy, and I'm in the middle of creating a hypnotherapy aid for healing and uh, starting to shift some of that energy that I was talking about, that vibration within us that empowers that greatness within us, that reminds us that we are already more than enough, that we are already know who we are at our core, that we already can trust ourselves and the universe, those types. those types of concepts. So that'll be ready, I'm hoping, by the end of the month. So
Okay. I look forward to experiencing that. Thank you very much.
you're very welcome.
And for those tuning in, be sure to come back for the rest of the interviews on the Holistic Pain Relief Summit. Remember to access Dr. Joe's free gift from below and pop into our Facebook group to share your takeaways from today's experts or ask any questions. If you know of anyone else who can benefit from these amazing speakers, please share. They can join at holisticpainreliefsummit.com, where the recordings will be available for 24 hours and more. Thank you again. Have a great day. And thanks, Dr. Joe. Bye.
Thank you.